The ALP Quarterly, Job and Proverbs. Lesson 1, Job 1:1 to 2:10. Job put to the test. The book of Job records the story of a man who went from abundant blessing and prosperity through a dark time in which he lost everything to a final situation in which his blessing and prosperity were restored. Along the way, Job interacts with 3 friends, as well as a 4th young man, Elihu, discussing the potential reasons for Job's suffering. Towards the end of the book, the Lord himself vindicates Job before his 3 friends, before restoring his blessing. The narrative frame around the poetic speeches of Job and his companions unveils for the reader the Lord's interaction behind the scenes with Satan, something not recounted to Job himself. The theme of the book of Job is often described as explaining the causes of suffering. But the book never does explain in a general way why good people suffer. Indeed, the frame narrative highlights the uniqueness of Job's situation. It is Job's unusual character that triggers the unparalleled events that follow. Nonetheless, the book's unique story challenges easy misconceptions about the nature of piety and prosperity, and sin and punishment. And it reveals truths about God that are important for those who suffer. It also anticipates the greatest undeserved suffering of all at the cross, where God himself enters the ring with Satan and perseveres in paying the cost of our sin, so that he may ultimately vindicate us and welcome us into his eternal presence. Job is a patriarchal figure, similar to Abraham. He was an independent leader in his own extended family unit, whose wealth was largely measured in flocks and herds. He's not directly connected to the line of promise through Abraham, though he is described in Ezekiel 14 and James 5 as a man of great wisdom and steadfastness. Like Melchizedek and Jethro, he appears as one of several figures in the pre-Sinai landscape who are worshippers of the true God, in spite of not being part of the family of promise. We don't know exactly where or when Job lived, though he may fit in the era of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, around 2000 to 1800 BC. We're told he lived in the land of Uz, Job 1:1, while Elihu was from the town of Buz in 32:2. And since Buz and Uz are listed as 2 of the sons of Nahor, the brother of Abraham, in Genesis 22:21, it's reasonable to suppose that these cities were in the region around Paddan Aram, where Laban and Rebekah lived. More importantly, Job is characterized by 2 intertwining features: his piety and his prosperity. The narrative starts by mentioning his piety, blameless and upright, fearing God and shunning evil, Job 1:1, and then describes his prosperity in terms of offspring and possessions, chapter 1 verses 2 through 4, before returning to his model piety, as he offers sacrifice even for his children's potential sins in verse 5. Job is introduced as a man who is living the good life in both senses of the word. His life was good in that he was an upright and devout man, but it was also good in the sense that he was blessed with a large family and many possessions. But was Job experiencing the good life in material terms because his life was good in ethical terms? Or was his life good in ethical terms because he had an easy life? Even before Satan raises the question, it's already subtly posed by the narrative itself. The fundamental conflict between God and Satan for the hearts and minds of humanity goes all the way back to Genesis 3. In the beginning, God created Adam and Eve to be his people, but Satan sought to separate them from his side. The initial issue was the question, can you be both holy and happy? Does serving and obeying God lead to life in all its fullness, or to a diminished experience of the world? Satan sought to persuade Adam and Eve that obedience to God in not eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was holding them back. Yet in spite of human sin, God committed himself to put enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. Now, the conflict in the book of Job is initiated by the Lord, not by Satan. The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" Verse 8. Job's very name, Iyov, sounds like the Hebrew word used in Genesis 3:15 for enmity, Avah. See also Job 33:10. And his God-fearing lifestyle was evidence of the Lord's victory in his struggle with Satan for the hearts and minds of humanity. In reply, Satan pointed to the benefits that the Lord had showered on Job. He claims that Job only loves God for what he gets out of the relationship, and that if Job's life were no longer materially good, he would no longer be ethically good either. Notice that God doesn't simply deny the truth of Satan's charge on the grounds of his own omniscience, though he certainly could have done. Nor does he proceed to afflict Job himself to test Job's commitment. Instead, God removes the barrier of protection around Job and allows Satan to test him up to a point. Satan is limited by God's sovereignty in how far he can go. But in order to demonstrate Job's faith publicly, for the earthly and the spiritual forces to see, the Lord allows Satan to buffet Job. Job must triumph over Satan by being faithful to God in spite of his sufferings. The scale of the contest, of which Job is not informed, is all-encompassing. His donkeys and his oxen, his sheep, his camels, and supremely every one of his children are swept away in a single cataclysmic afternoon. Yet Job endured this loss with a steadfastness for which he would become famous. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Verse 21. In the final verse of chapter 1, we're told, "In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong." Verse 22. It would seem as if Job has passed the test, and the story can end at this point. But this resolution is merely temporary, and the conflict now moves into round 2. Like round 1, round 2 begins with an interview between God and Satan. Job 2, verses 1 to 6. Once again, it is God who provokes the conflict, saying, "Have you considered my servant Job?" Verse 3. After the interview, we hear of a further round of affliction for Job, this time involving his body as well as his spirit. The first round only took away Job's possessions and his children. It did not touch him himself physically. Now, however, Satan is given permission by the Lord to assault Job with anything short of death. Verses 4 through 6. And so Satan strikes Job with painful sores from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. This time Job's afflictions are compounded by the reaction of his wife. "Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die." Verse 9. She's urging him to do the very thing that Satan is tempting him to do in verse 6. Now, Job's wife has been heavily judged for this throughout church history. Augustine called her the devil's advocate, and Calvin a tool of Satan. But we shouldn't forget that Job's sufferings are in large part her sufferings also. Like Peter, she spoke words that originated from Satan, see Matthew 16:23, but she had particularly more excuse than he did. It's worth noting that she apparently remained alongside Job throughout the ordeal. Even coming from such a trusted source, Job resisted the temptation, responding, "You speak as one of the foolish women would speak." Verse 10. I think this translation is too weak because it misses the moral connotation of foolishness in the Bible. It would be better to translate it as, "You're talking like an ungodly woman. Shall we receive good from God? And shall we not receive evil?" The narrator then adds, "In all this, Job did not sin with his lips." Job has now been tested twice and passed the test both times. If those verses were all that we knew about Job, we might think that his endurance under suffering was easy and untroubled. But this too is merely a temporary and incomplete resolution, a fact hinted at in the qualification, he did not sin with his lips. Verse 10. Had his heart already begun to murmur? The bulk of the book is taken up with debates between Job and his friends, in which Job wrestles with the harsh reality of his situation and seeks to hold on to that faith. It's one thing to respond well to short-term suffering, with orthodox statements about a good God being in control of our destiny. It's something else altogether to remain steadfast in our hearts over the long haul of deep adversity. Application questions. Why does God initiate the challenge to Satan over Job? Didn't he know how it would work out? Why not leave Job in peace? 2. Is God sovereign over our suffering and the evil things that happen to us? How do we know that? And why is that good news? 3. Do people today suffer like Job did? 4. How does Job's steadfastness in suffering point forward to and anticipate the sufferings of Jesus?